comparing it to Vibal for bringing a new life to these very old works now. When I read about like the Nicole CuUnjieng and Typhoon Yolanda, it really takes me back to a very different time. But it's also a nice reminder to sort of question the everyday realities around us, so I'm very glad that they found a new life. I will read 2 or 3 short works. I'll just excerpt them so I won't bore you with everything. The first one is from Living at Home with Inequality. One of the maids from my mother's house comes over to my apartment to clean once a week. It's an easy way for her to increase her salary by 25%, as she takes time on her fixed hours at my mother's house while still receiving her full monthly wage there. When she first came to help me in my new apartment, I felt that this time there was something different between us. Though she's very accustomed to seeing many of my things having long arranged and tended to them at my parents' home, there was now a direct, silent basis for comparison between us. She and I are the same age. We both live in Taguig. When she walked into my apartment, I felt that sharply and suddenly, that we were 2 young women of the same age, same height, same country, same city, and that we were utterly alien. Indeed, the BGC portion of Taguig in which I live may very well be London to hers. I often wonder about her house while she cleans mine, but this is merely an exercise for me. While she is forced to live in my reality, to clean and to polish it, I am utterly shielded from hers. I never have to be made uncomfortable, and that false protection is a privilege for sale. In fact, I happen to live in an apartment facing diplomatic and tech lands. Looking toward the treetops of Forest Park and Manila Polo Club, flanking my apartment are the Manila Golf Club, the American Cemetery Memorial, and the Singaporean Embassy's beautiful properties. Removed from meaningful interaction with the reality of my fellow Filipinos, of their altogether different Taguigs, and of what the Philippines is like for the majority of its residents, I could very nearly forget I'm in the Philippines at all. When the article mentioned that females in affluent countries no longer want to do or have time to do certain work, I didn't think first of nannies in New York or caregivers in American retirement homes. I thought of our own chain of mothers stepping in for each other here in the Philippines, linking the province to the city and the barrio to the subdivision. It's so easy to become emotional about the treatment of our OFWs abroad, who too often are mercilessly relegated to the status of second-class citizens. And is it not a greater injustice when it happens to someone in her own country? How many times have I sat at the lunch at a restaurant and seen people fail to make eye contact when the guys enter the same room, share the same table, and feed our children? I'm so ashamed to say that I've forgotten to look up at times too. Then on Sunday, I tried to make eye contact with one of the guys who come to the event, Art in the Park, but as the beautiful kids ran circles around our legs and screamed in glee, she never lifted her gaze from them, being so accustomed to unacknowledgement by the adults. Here we must return to the political economic point because of how numb too many of us, lucky and wealthy, have become to living alongside such stark inequality. We pushed it out of sight and shielded ourselves from meaningfully engaging with its reality. We often fondly recount how long a certain family has worked with ours, meaning worked for ours. But that only serves to show that there has not been wide, meaningful progress if the children and grandchildren of those who served as surrogate mothers to our own children have not found other forms of employment. The divide between the two existences continues unabated. We may think too that we are giving our helpers a place to live, and we are. But as a helper in New York, Emma recounts, despite the luxury and comfort open to her by living at her employer's home in New York, during her meals there, she would often feel guilty and lose her appetite. If you're a mom, she says, you want anything you eat to be shared by your kids. The roadways out of such deep inequality are slow going, but as we undertake the long work and bear the desensitized technical discussion of economic policy, we can recover the moral component to this discourse easily and immediately. We can make eye contact, face the ethical weight of our privilege, and recover something of our humanity. Though we may be able to buy comfort, it shouldn't ever actually feel comfortable. Now I'm going to read a short part of something that I wrote when I stopped writing for the Manila Times, which was basically an explanation for why I was no longer going to write my column called On Hypocrisy and My Failed Critique of Women. I realized that my critiques of inequality had to come from a place of self-critique. Anything less would have been hypocrisy. In fact, I thought that this was what I had to offer, an immanent critique, which would be more effective for the fact that it issued from within. When I moved home to the Philippines halfway through writing this column, however, it became harder and harder to square my anti-elite critique with my own life. It's one thing to rail about inequality while living in the first world, where all the conveniences are already built into the infrastructure such that I could live a fairly middle-class life without having to sacrifice any comfort. But when I moved home, it just felt dishonest. One of the pieces I was happiest I wrote is an article written while I was living in the US on the hyper-consolidation of the oligarchy, the neoliberal nightmare, IS Manila, and the Filipino elite. But the truth is that since I moved home, my social circle has not meaningfully expanded at all. In fact, I've only become further removed from others and from the injustices of Philippine life now that I'm home. We have so many ways here of feeding ourselves in. Our society is so small and only gets smaller all the time as we continue to marry each other and then retreat into the safety of our maternity-paternity, where you are generally allowed to ask yourself what is best for your family first and above any other question. There's a reason why successful revolutionary leaders tend not to have families. And traffic doesn't help either. I'm only incentivized to stay within my known borders, to use my intervillage sticker to get from point A to point B, and to never leave the confines of those villages if I don't have to. Thus I end up on EDSA for hours. Really, it is deeply disturbing that in moving physically closer to the inequality I sought to critique, I became more sheltered from its living, breathing, violent reality. This country is so riven by class, especially in this capital city where we are each so separated. But what I've learned is that self-critique is all well and good. It's good to air things out, and it's good to make others more self-conscious through my self-reflections. But ultimately, if there's no meaningful change in my life or others' lives, I don't know what any of it was worth. What's the point of just being aware? And even worse than that, am I just expiating my own guilt through writing such that I actually prolong my ability to live my life with comfort amid entrenched poverty? Yet it's not really sensible for me to sacrifice comforts I can afford to completely falsify my own life towards some vanity of affected solidarity with others. In fact, that's likely even more insulting. The fact is, I don't understand inequality. I haven't had to understand inequality, and I shouldn't be writing about it if it's just going to be writing at the end of it all. Here's to hoping that we finally achieve truly inclusive growth, to hoping that we reorient our lives, and to hoping that we are made to feel every second all the violence and injustice of the reality that we actually do live in. Writing, thinking, and being aware aren't enough. We need to feel it. Now to end on a lighter note, I'll read just one last piece called Undercover Undergrad, which will give you a sense of the different scope of the writing that's in this book. It's not all that doom and gloom. Undercover Undergrad. Colleges, particularly the Anglo-American varieties, in many ways are like floating oases, both within yet apart from the worlds they aim to prepare you for. As a graduate student in a predominantly undergraduate-centered campus, meanwhile, you can easily feel like a tourist in a space that is not yours, or more accurately, no longer yours. That rush of youth, of carving one's own place in the playground of pretend adulthood, is all around an obscene, blushing view, and I felt its freeing wildness careening all around me, but I was meant to just ignore it. Those sleepless spaces of 2 late nights, the possession of an untouched future, parked expectantly beyond the gates of campus, skirts too short for the weather, the joy that vibrates throughout on sunny days, the huddled conspiring and intricate formation, destruction of social worlds, utterly unique and ephemeral. None of it had anything to do with me now. I heard it was worse still for those who decided to undertake their graduate degrees at their undergraduate alma mater. They walked around with a new cohorts of professional, sensible PhD students on the first campus floor, and as they drew new geographies atop old ones, they returned on jarring memories of this thing, our youth, that seemed suddenly so slippery and so strange and so long past. Over there was the frat where she drank jungle juice served from a trash can and mixed with a broom handle. There was the bench she associated with falling in love. And somehow it felt as though they had never truly occupied the spaces in which strangers were now sitting. I was a teacher's assistant for my professor's class, and I always wanted to begin the class by assuring them, listen, we're really close in age. Don't let my obviously well-rested eyes suggest otherwise. Sure, I was silently thrilled when the best-looking 21-year-old set out to befriend me. Brushing up too close against this world now no longer yours, I easily found myself succumbing to it. Next thing I knew, I was at a party where a full quarter of the crowd was an entire decade younger than I was, and I had absolutely no idea what was happening to my life. I heard myself telling people I was a sophomore majoring in econ, People asked me if I was going to Myrtle for senior week. I ate single-serving hummus packages from the corner deli for every meal. Why wouldn't I try to return there undercover to the site of my youth? I was a student again, and isn't that what the joy of being a student was? Wasn't it bound up with the rawness of our incomprehensible future forever held at bay? But as an undercover undergrad, with the distance of age and the composure of a repeat offender, you can't feel it. The agony and the terror are gone. The love interests who would never have given you the time of day when you were in college seek you out now. The conversations in which you were so intimidated before, you now dance through with a detached aloofness you could never convincingly master when you were young, back when it would have counted. As Nathan Heller wrote so perfectly in The New Yorker, the shock of the 20s is how narrow that window of experience really is, and how inevitable it seems both at the time and afterward. At some point, it is late, too late, and you're standing on the sidewalk outside somewhere very loud. The wind is blowing. It's the same cool, restless, late-night breeze that blew on trampled 1920s lawns, dazed 60 streets, and anywhere young people gather. Nearby, someone who doesn't smoke is smoking. An attractive stranger with a lightning laugh jaywalks between cars with a friend, making eye contact before scurrying inside. You're far from home, it's quiet. All at once, you have a thrilling sense of nowness, of the sheer potential of a verdant night with all these unmet people in it. For a long time after that, you think you'll never lose those dreams. That was, as they say, then. I had left my undergraduate-dominated graduate campus. I was preparing finally to write my dissertation away from school when I received an email at 2 a.m. from Johan, an old friend. He had written our entire group of college best friends. I just went to this dance party in Brooklyn and it sucked. Can we throw an epic dance party at my apartment on Friday like we used to? On Friday, we danced to all the songs that we had worn down well. For when we all went together to see the Knife in concert, when we used to turn the basement of SAE into our private raves, when Luke tried to compose his own electro, and we all lived within the same 1 mile radius. Though I know, of course, that it is painfully true what Wordsworth wrote, that nothing can bring back the hour of splendor in the grass, glory in the flower. That night, and on a few nights under cover, I felt it.